This is an instructional video on how to enter forms into the REDCap system. Before moving forward, we do need to know two important terms. One is record, the other is instrument. In REDCap, a record is the equivalent of a patient, and an instrument is the equivalent of a form. So if you think about this, you have many patients, and each of the patients has a number of different forms. In REDCap, we would say there are many records, and each record has a number of different instruments. So on this record status dashboard, there is an aggregation of different records, all of the different records. You can see it written here. And this table has all of the different forms themselves, the instruments listed at the top. It's just that since there are no records yet, there's no data displayed. And the data itself that would be displayed under each of these different columns would be bubbles of the status icon that you can see a legend for here. So let's go ahead and add a new record. To add a new record, you just click this green button, and you're taken to a single record view, this record homepage as it's called. Again, you see this legend for status icons, and now you see one of them. It's a gray bubble, and what the color gray means in this case is that it's incomplete, or in other words, there's no data saved for that form. So to access a record, whether you are updating it or creating it for the first time, you just click on the bubble, and you're taken to that instrument, that form. In a form, there are a number of different fields and a number of different types of data that each of those fields can have. The first data here, this first field, is a text field with a specific type of an integer. That's automatically done. We don't have to worry about that. It's a 1 here. It will increase as the record count increases. The next field is a simple yes/no single choice question. If you click no, it functions as you would expect. If you click yes, there's a condition that if there is a patient referred from the center, that the patient's identifier is needed. So let's say it's 123 ABC. And that's helpful functionality in REDCap so that only if the information is needed will it request it from you. So that's a text field, which is a new data type. And below the identifier field, there is a year of birth field. Now, let's say somebody did hypothetically type in 2001 for the year of birth. That would not be accepted actually, because here, again, we have a very specific type of data, which is an integer. However, let's say again, somebody types this in, but they accidentally leave another 1 at the end. Again, that's caught with a validation because the age can only be within a specific range. So if we enter 2001 as an integer, it will be accepted. Further, we also have this field, this year of age at time of diagnosis. We have the same difference in that unlike this text field that accepts anything, this one only accepts integers. So we could say 23, and it will be accepted. Now do know that there is another validation here. Of course, nobody can be -1, so that would not be accepted. The next field is a date type, which we'll come to another date type below and see that more in detail. This one has been automatically filled in for us based on just the date that this form is being filled out. The next field is important. Is the patient's consent available? Now, this is another single choice. If this is a no, then there will be nothing further to fill out below, in addition rather. But if it is a yes, there's a request, a conditional again, for the date of consent. Now, for text fields that are validated as dates, we have 3 different ways that we can enter the information. We could enter the text right here. So that's a valid date, it works. If you accidentally enter incorrectly, it won't work. So in that format, we're good. You could also click today if this was the day that they provided consent, or click on this text box, this picker here, and you can go ahead and click right into the date itself, which makes it a lot easier to choose and set it up instead of having to type the whole date. The next is another single answer. But before moving on to the next section, I will clarify an additional interesting point with this question, which is very special. Some of the questions actually have a conditional effect on the rest of the forms. If you noticed when we first clicked on the registration form from the record homepage, that was the only form that we could fill out because there was no consent that was registered. So once we register consent, you'll notice when we go back to that page, there will be additional forms that we can access. Moving from this section to the next, we have another new type of input, which is a dropdown. That's if we have specific choices that we can choose from for the input. So let's click on this. You can see there's a number of different options, and we'll click on Jordan. Again, we have a few normal text boxes, so I'll just fill these out as normal text boxes. And we come to an email address. Now, an email address is text, but it is a specific form of text. In that, you have text on the left, you have an @ symbol in the center, you have some domain on the right, domain being like a website name, you have a dot, and then you have the last part of the domain that we would use. If you are missing any of these parts, it's actually not going to accept it. So if we remove that, we see it's not a valid email address. And if we remove this, we see it's also not a valid email address. So we need to have all of the parts for this to be accepted. One of the last fields on this form is the contact number. So in many places, people use parentheses, spaces, and hyphens in order to enter a phone number, but we don't know how to standardize that easily. So instead of having all of those different options available as formatting, we'll just accept the number itself. So if we type in with parentheses, hyphens, spaces, whatnot, it won't be accepted here. But if we remove all those symbols, now the integer is accepted. Now we come to the comment field. Now, within the comment field, you can see it's a big text box, but there's one big difference here compared to all of the fields above. If you look at contact number even, you'll see that there's a star with this must provide value tag. If you see that tag that you must provide value, that means that that form requires that field to be filled. But in this case, comment's not required. So this is just, if there's some additional note to add, you can add it. Now, when you're near the end of the form, you'll see this drop down for complete. This is the form status we looked at before. If the form is, let's say, incomplete, we need to add some more information here. Maybe we need to verify something before we're sure of it. We can leave it as such and then save and exit the form. So let's do that. Now that we've done that, at this page, we see two new things. Number one, many new forms are available to fill out. Only 3 of these are grayed out currently. And the color of this status is changed to red for incomplete. Now let's say you've come back and you've decided, okay, this is a complete record. Maybe someone needs to verify it, like a supervisor, for example. So you can click Unverified, save and exit the form. And when we look at this record homepage, now we see that the colors changed it again to yellow. Finally, if we go back into the form, maybe we're a supervisor, we come back, we check, we say, this all looks good. We can mark it as complete, save and exit the form. and you've got a very, very nice green color displayed here. So that more or less would cover the basics of the form, but there are some other details when you are working with the data and collaborating. That's very helpful. So you'll see that next to all of these different fields, there is an H button and a text bubble here. Now, the H button is the history of that actual field. So let's look at the history of this complete status field. We'll click it here. And this just shows the changes that have happened to that field over time. You can see that, okay, at this time, at 4:25 p.m., the form was saved and marked as incomplete. Later, it was marked as unverified, and even later as complete. Not only do you have the date and time that that happened, but very handily, you have the user that did that. So you would see, for example, a data entry person or a principal investigator. Um, these different people would have the username um, next to what the change was. So we can close that. It's very useful for auditing. Additionally, we can see this text bubble below. This is for field notes. So let's say, for example, the patient's referring ID has been verified with the referring institute. Okay, so maybe this is just an additional comment that's been added. We comment and add that. And once that's done, you'll see going forward that there will be a yellow bubble where there is an actual field note, a comment on that field. So if we click this, we'll see very similar to the history. We have a timestamp, we have the user, and then we have the comment. Okay, so let's leave the form. To leave the form, you have a few options. We have save and exit form right here, which is a very handy way just to get out and go back to the record home. But you could also say, move on to another form. Let's say you're filling out a series of them. Save and go to the next form. Or you could save and exit the record. If this is all that's done and you are done entering data for the patient, you can exit the record or even go to the next record. So we're going to save and exit the form in this case. And you can see the form is done and you are ready to fill out any other forms that you might need to.